As some of y'all might know, I have C6 Jahoda now, and I featured her as seemingly my second best option in my Nefer teams, at least, obviously under C2 Nahida. But as I was trying her out in the other Lunar teams that I play, I discovered the most hilarious thing that I get a feeling most of y'all are not even going to believe, so you may want to sit down for this one. Let's remind ourselves about what Jahoda is all about. Basically, the idea is that she has a skill that is all about filling up a water bottle with a feck element so that it starts firing that feck element in an AoE every 2 seconds. Funnily enough, this actually ends up with no ICD elemental apps, so enjoy that. Her ult summons 2 robots that can also get a feck infusion if you're close enough to an enemy with an aura. They have a weird ICD, so over the duration of their ult, it's only 2 apps total. Her A1 provides a buff to her ult based on the majority element. On the other hand, though, her ult also heals the on-fielder if they're above 70% HP, then not only do you also get to heal the lowest HP ally, you also get 100 EM to your on-fielder. We're talking about C6 Jahoda in this video, so real quick when it comes to Constellation, C1 is just a 50% chance to bounce to another target, or the same target if it's single target gameplay. This hit also has some ICD, but just think about it as every 2 hits. C2 makes the A1 passive that I mentioned about her ult also get the effect of the second most elements. C3 is ult levels, C5 is skill levels, so more healing or more damage. C4 actually gives 4 energy per infused robot. Keep in mind that you start off with 2 robots. If you have Electro on the team, you might get 3. And so for a 70 cost ult, we're looking at potentially 8 energy or 12 energy refund. And finally, C6, which is the real big one, is that when you fill up her bottle, all moon sign characters get 5 crit rate and 40 crit damage, which is 50 CV. This actually lasts for 20 seconds, and it's for all moon sign characters, so that also includes folks who are in fact off field. So now, of course, that we remember how Jahoda even works, let's get into the other 2 lunar archetypes that I actually looked at with Jahoda. So before we continue, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel because your support will of course help combat the YouTube algorithm. We'll start with Lunar Charged teams. As Jahoda is an animo character, you're mainly going to bring her as a replacement for Sucrose, unless you're super heavily invested in your Nefer, I guess. For both characters, we're naturally using VV on them to get the red shred for the team. A notable alternative would be for me to run Morningstar on Nefer so that I could run Serenade on Jahoda, but at the present moment my Serenade and Nefer build is so damn strong that it'll basically do. So on the one hand, we're comparing the team-wide EM buff from Sucrose against the crit buff from the moon sign characters. But on the other hand, what I've noticed with Jahoda is that it's kinda hard to maintain the VV buff. VV lasts for 8 seconds. Jahoda's skill and ult cooldowns are naturally longer than 8 seconds. Infused hits from her skill or her ult don't actually swell, so it's just the initial hit from her ult and the hit after filling her bottle that actually trigger a swell. So we're kind of having to rely on her charge attack to swell again, and frankly, I ain't going to be doing that. Meanwhile, not only is Sucrose a mage, so we can use her normal attacks to get VV to work, but her ult also swells. So as long as you swap back to her every 8 seconds, give or take, you're pretty much good to go. And I think it's mainly because of that I'm still seeing like 6k more DPS with Sucrose rather than Jahoda in a Lunar Charged team. That and, well, it's my kind of Lunar Charged team where the C6 and C6 Jahoda won't affect someone like the illustrious in the extreme Her Royal Highness the Queen of Sass Miko, the wise and beautiful. So of course that's kind of cooked. Curious if Flynn's mains can chime in on whether Sucrose is necessarily better than C6 Jahoda in this team, because at that point you have Oops or Moon Sign. Well, that being said though, we do end up with the Ascendant Gleam buff coming out of Sucrose rather than actually having Oops or Moon Sign. So, I don't know, let me know in the comments, Flynn's mains, what you actually find to be the better choice. That being said, if you do end up screwing up with Nefer's shield, Jahoda does provide an additional buffer by being a healer, so at least you can actually keep the team healthy. So it's a bit of a give and take in this case. I'd probably say that it's kind of even Stevens then in that regard between Sucrose and Jahoda. Really just depends on whether or not you need that healing. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, we need to talk about Lunar Crystalise teams with Jahoda, because as it turns out, she's actually really good in these teams, like weirdly, shockingly, strangely good as an animo character. First thing I want to draw your attention to is of course that no ICD application for the infused bottle. Because while that's going, if you time it with Columbina's own Hydro app, you could effectively get one new Hydro app every second, which would sustain 2 Lunar Crystalise reactions. On top of that, there is the intermittent extra Hydro app from Jahoda's ult and the potential extra Hydro app from a bounced attack from her C1. As a result of that, I've actually noticed that Jahoda and Columbina seem to provide enough Hydro app to almost fully sustain enough of a Hydro aura for someone like Ningguang, a character with so many Geo hits due to her normal attack being 2 hits, her charge attack being 4, her ult being a whopping 12, and the subsequent C6 charge attack being another 8. All of this, of course, on standard ICD. On top of that, we have Linnea's Geo app, which is reacting with that Hydro aura. Now that being said, for whatever reason, we seem to be getting similar total Lunar Crystalise counts when it comes to running Farina on the team instead. Now compared to an old demonstration that I did in a previous video, we seem to be getting a few more reactions out of Linnea and a few less out of Ningguang. And compared to a permanent Hydro aura, we seem to be getting similar amounts of reactions from Linnea, but Ningguang ends up getting 50% more, which essentially suggests that with Jahoda and Columbina on the team, 1 in every 3 Geo hits that actually apply element from Ningguang will be applying element to nothing. That being said though, I seem to get more DPS with Jahoda on the team compared to Farina. Now for starters, I don't need Linnea to be on some kind of healing build anymore. She can in fact be on Morningstar or a DPS Husk set if that's what you have on her. For me, between Jahoda's CV buff and the DPS artifact set, well, Linnea seems to be doing double damage. Meanwhile, it seems like my Columbina is not getting much value from Jahoda's C6 as her DPS only goes up by around about 8%. So what's going on? Well, for starters, I already have Columbina on the Morningstar set, so her set bonuses aren't getting improved in this regard. Instead, it's pretty much the same reason why I find an HP hat to be stronger than a crit damage hat for my Columbina. It's her signature weapon. Already I have over 200 crit damage with an HP hat, but there's an additional 60 crit damage for her lunar damage, which, by the way, ends up being around about 86.5% of her total DPS. So she pretty much has 290 crit damage, effectively. But then there's also the plus 40 crit damage from Jahoda. That actually only ends up being about a 13% total crit damage increase, if you will. For reference, I have 233 crit damage on Linnea. So having 40% more crit damage for her actually ends up with a 17% total crit damage increase. Now you might think, with the loss of Farina's damage percent buff, I should have less DPS on Ningguang. But for some reason, I end up with a bit more DPS on her, possibly within the margin of error, and frankly, I'm not 100% sure why. I probably just got better at playing Ningguang over time. I've certainly adjusted my rotation to have her on field for a little longer, so that every use of her skill actually generates particles. Perhaps that's what's helping. The EM for the many Lunar Crystalise reactions that Ningguang is providing is probably also helping too. This is of course coming from Jahoda. And of course the team does become super safe to play since we don't have Farina draining everyone's HP, and on top of that, we hilariously are playing with double healer with Linnea essentially acting as our backup healer. But of course, on the flip side, Jahoda does next to no DPS on this team. Looking at who Jahoda would be replacing on this team, well, I'm comparing her to my C2 Illua, and C6 Jahoda seems to be stronger than C2 Illua. Probably because whilst Illua has a team-wide Geo crit value buff that's a lot weaker than what C6 Jahoda's can provide, his Nightingale songs only affect the on-fielder, so for the most part, it's Ningguang all the time that gets them. Yeah, it's also the weaker version of the Nightingale song, but it's actually a pretty solid DPS increase for Ningguang. I guess if I were a Zabai main, then Illua should be stronger than C6 Jahoda, although I'm actually not 100% sure about that, actually. Zabai mains, let me know in the comments. But somehow, that still doesn't seem to result in more DPS for Ningguang herself. I seem to be getting more with Jahoda, at least within the margin of error, so I'm not entirely sure why. With Illua, we only have Columbina's Hydro app to work with, so Ningguang's Lunar Crystalise count is of course significantly lower, although for some reason the total number of Lunar Crystalizes that we see, at least in the reaction counter of the Simulacrum, doesn't seem to be that far off. Probably within the margin of error as well, so I'm starting to wonder if there's something wrong with the reaction counter in the simulacrum. It just doesn't make sense that having two Hydro characters providing Hydro Wrap, or in this case a Hydro character and an Anemo character, somehow can result in the same number of reactions as having one Hydro character. That doesn't make sense to me. Simulate various effects by giving characters more buffs or more stats at this point, so I simulated C6 Illua by giving everyone some CV, since they're all basically being Geo DPSs, and I'm including Columbina in that regard. This does result in slightly more DPS than C6 Jahoda, which once again might be within the margin of error. But meanwhile, I still seem to be doing less DPS than the run that I have in a previous video running Shilinen and Farina instead of Jahoda and Linnea, so it's kind of all up in the air at this point. Oh, and finally, I did decide to say screw it, and I started running Ningguang on the Night Sky Not Quite DPS set instead. And while we're at it, I actually started using Widsith instead of Solar Pearl, because it's kind of hilarious. With Lunar Crystalise, Ningguang can actually use the massive EM buff from Widsith, and of course the crit rate from the set bonus basically means that running a crit rate weapon is kind of out of the question, so running a crit damage weapon like Widsith does in fact make a lot more sense. At this point, I'm not even particularly biased or fussed towards any of the Widsith buffs. Whichever one pops up is a-okay for me, since at the end of the day I can't really control it, so there's no point crashing out about not getting, let's say, the EM buff every single time. But my rotations still seem to be hovering around 20 seconds long, so we are getting a Widsith buff once every other rotation for Ningguang's DPS. And at the end of all of that, it's another 4k DPS. In summary, instead of Jahoda being my best option for a Lunar Charged team, she does seem right now to be the best option I have for a Lunar Crystalise team. Even if I don't end up with the absolute most DPS, the team does feel a lot more comfy to play. So using Favj on Jahoda, she's also battering the team quite nicely, and I have found myself not really running into any ER issues, especially with someone like Columbina. To that end, I've found ult into skill to make the most sense if I find myself not actually critting with the initial hit of Jahoda's ult. Well, I can still rely on the little robots from her ult to potentially crit while I'm running around and filling up that water bottle. So that would actually generate the energy from Favj, which would of course provide energy for the team. I haven't actually felt the need to swap back to Jahoda early either to try and get another Fav proc, which I could if I really wanted to. So it seems to me at the present moment, energy isn't actually a huge issue for me with Jahoda on the team. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about C6 Jahoda? Do you even have her at C6? With or without, what teams are you playing with Jahoda? If you are even playing any teams with Jahoda, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoy. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and as always, until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Don't waste my time. this rotten, decaying world!